you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your wonderful speech. I am a graduate student from School of Theology. Yeah, I'm also Chinese. I find, yeah, I really appreciate many of your comments on my country, and I feel that you know China much better than many scholars, foreigners I know in the US and in China. I find there is a problem in the Western academic circle that does the research about China. Most prerequisite assumptions are based on the Western framework. I find that many Western scholars like to analyze China from the Western perspectives. I find that, the Chinese society is totally different from the any Western systems. As I study theology, I find that many issues, many points analysis should be drawn on the very fundamental cultural and social analysis.
Okay, what is the question?
Yeah, the question is that, do you think that there should be a revolution in the Chinese studies? I would say that a new paradigm, a new framework needed to be created to do the research on China.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I must say you've asked a very, very big question. And you're absolutely right about your core point, that the West doesn't understand China. That's very, very clear. And I see my role, I'm not Chinese, as you know. By the way, I don't read Chinese, I don't speak Chinese. And actually, I don't claim to be an expert on China, okay? But I've been obviously watching China for 50 years, right? And I've gone to China a few dozen times. And I also live in a Chinese majority society, which is Singapore. And so I have a sense of how the Chinese mind works. And it's very clear to me that the Chinese mind works in a very different way from the Western mind. Now, of course, when the Chinese, like the Japanese, by the way, when they come to America, they pretend that they agree with everything. And that's part of the diffidence that I spoke about. But in their heart of hearts, they don't agree. And so, for example, and one of the amazing realities about East Asia that people don't realize actually is that Japan is an ally of the West. China is seen now as a threat to the West, an adversary of the West. But culturally, China is closer to the West than Japan is, Japan, the Japanese mindset is even more closed, and I can know that, and even more different. But I feel this intuitively. And it's sort of puzzling to me that even though the United States has produced lots of good scholars on China over the years, it hasn't been able to convey the most fundamental reality that Americans should accept as the most important reality that dealing with China, that the future of China will not be determined by how much it becomes like America. You know how Kurt Campbell and Ellie Redner wrote an article in Foreign Affairs. We are so disappointed. We engaged China. China didn't become like us. Now that's actually quite in some ways, rather arrogant statement, because China's future will be determined by 4,000 years of Chinese history. I mean, 4,000 years of history, there are all kinds of cultural impulses, cultural norms, cultural roots. And so they are at play within Chinese society. And I want to add another point. If the Chinese Communist Party was not in conformity, broadly speaking, with the deeper cultural roots of China, it couldn't survive. You have to, in one way or another, be part of that cultural framework. And so for me, it is actually fascinating. I watch China as an outsider. It is fascinating to see the return of China because China is clearly struggling. It's struggling to find the balance between adopting a lot of Western norms, like free market economics, and at the same time keeping its own norms, and then blending them. And sometimes they blend them so ingeniously, I wonder how the hell they do it. But at the end of the day, you have to judge China by the results. And the fact that they have gone from having 1/8 the size of the Chinese GNP to only being a few percent smaller is an amazing achievement. How did they do it? Right? It wasn't just by copying from the West. It's also by using some of their strengths. And that's something that we have to understand. You have to understand China on Chinese terms and how they view it. And it's not easy.